Hey everyone, Joseph here. I go by Audi Snapper on the forums, and today's video, it's hopefully going to be much shorter than the last video I posted, is to share with you my freshly painted Baja Rey Ford Raptor body and some prep and painting tips that I picked up over the years. I know there are a bunch of RC body paint how-to videos here on YouTube, so I won't go into a ton of detail on how I prep or paint Lexan RC bodies, but I will share with you some of the steps in my process that help me achieve a successful paint job that, can hold up to some abuse. I'd also be interested in hearing what tips and tricks you all might have, so be sure to share them in the comments section below. But before we jump in, let's roll the intro. Welcome back to those of you who have visited my channel before. I really do appreciate you stopping by again. And if you are new to the channel, thank you for checking out my video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so that you get notified when I release a new video. All right, so I'll be honest. I'm curious. Let me know what you guys think of the color in the comments section below. I know it's a bold color, but I do like orange, and although it's more of a kind of a golden bronze orange, it is made up of, these two colors over here, the gold and the orange. Where did I get the color, you might ask? I'm glad you asked. So I came across this really rad photo way back when I was first designing the truck in the computer, and I've had it saved all of these years. After I painted the first Raptor body, that sort of beige one that I had on the first iteration of this truck, I stumbled on the image again and said to myself that if I ever painted another truck body, this would be the look that I would go for. I was so pumped to paint a new body at the time, this sort of gold-orange color. I even bought the paints right away, thinking I would paint a new body back in, I think it was like 2017. But sadly, as you all know, I didn't, and the paint has been sitting here for the past 4 years. So here it is, and overall, I think it turned out pretty well, minus the little imperfections, the little drips, the little screw-ups that sort of blend away and fade away. You don't really see them. I'm anxious to get it out there and get it dirty again. So let's talk about the process. If you are guessing that the cardboard box behind me is in some way part of this video, you'd be right. Welcome to Cardboard Box Reuse Part 2. For Part 1, take a look at my other cardboard box adaptation video. If you haven't seen it already, I'll link the video over here. This particular cardboard box behind me is my mini DIY spray booth. Later in the video, I'll give you a very, very quick tour, but in general, there's not much to it. It's a box with a couple lights and an exhaust mounted to the top. But, let's not shortchange the cardboard box too much. I was able to produce this pretty cool looking body. So let's run through some of the steps I often take for a project like this. The first step for me on a paint scheme like this was to make sure I could get the old P-cut vinyl cutter up and running again in order to cut the TSCO logos. I did a quick, search online for a sticker of the TSCO logo and couldn't find a black and white version. So instead, I figured I would try to cut one for myself. I only use this machine, once every couple of years, but every time I do use it, I'm glad I have it. I've had this cutter for probably 10 to 15 years now, so it's a bit outdated, but it does do the job. It's a little hard to see, but the white version of the logo that's being cut right now is reversed because I plan to stick it to the inside of the body to mask the white area that will sit behind the black logo. At this point, I hadn't really decided whether or not I would leave the vinyl in place or remove it and then use white paint to create the white background. But in the end, I decided to leave the vinyl in place. It seemed to work out fine. Weeding, or that's what they call it when you pull out all the excess vinyl, can be fun, but sometimes a little bit annoying if there's a lot that needs to be weeded out. It's also kind of a waste, but it comes with the territory, I guess. These large rolls of what looks like masking tape are really just that, large masking tape rolls that don't stick quite as well as masking tape. And they are as old as the machine that I have, so they aren't super easy to work with. But again, you know, they get the job done. So let's jump over to the spray booth, and I'll give you some insight as to what I've got going on there. Welcome to Cardboard Box Adaptation Reuse Part 2. Seriously, it's just a cardboard box. But yeah, so you can see here I've got a bunch of stuff that I use for, you know, prepping and painting the Lexan bodies. Let's start with the tape over here on the right. We've got the blue painter's tape, which you're all familiar with. The yellow stuff is auto body stuff. I like it because it has a sharp edge and it sticks really well. I've had good success with it in the past. Over here, you've got the rubbing alcohol, which you may have seen in my last video. Love this stuff. Works really well. Prepping anything that I'm about to paint, I use the spray nozzle to spray it on the microfiber towel, which I have here. Good because it doesn't leave a lot of lint. Don't mind this piece of lint. I don't know. I guess I've shown you guys these like 4 times now. These are painter's gloves. Love these things. Got the rubber texture, plus it's breathable. This is the Duplicolor vinyl fabric paint that I used for the last body. This stuff is great. Sticks really well to the Lexan bodies and is very flexible, very durable. I used it on the outside of the body on the last one, and it was great. For this build, I'm using the Tamiya matte spray, which is going to be sprayed on the outside of the body to sort of knock down the gloss. I'll show you what that looks like in a second here. For this particular build, I am using the Createx or Wicked Color stuff. This is the Wicked Gold, and I'm going to mix it with the Pearl Orange. Cool stuff. It seems to adhere to the bodies really well. This is just a little container that I picked up from the local hobby shop. And I use it to mix the paint. I need to shake this up a bit. And this is what it looks like. Well, you've seen the finished product, but that's what it looks like wet. Anyway. For this paint, I use the 4011 reducer. I think they recommend the 4012, but this is what I had on hand, and it seems to work. So, yeah, it works good. And for spraying on the paint, I'm using this airbrush. I think I got it off of Amazon. I'll put the link in the description below. Nothing too exciting, pretty basic stuff. And here we have a test of what I've been trying. That's the gold, and that was attempt number 1 with the orange and gold mixed, and attempt number 2. And you can see, if you look kind of closely, there is a line right down the middle where I sprayed the matte Tamiya paint, and you can kind of tell the difference between the high gloss Lexan stuff and the matte, and I really like the look of it. I've got 2 stripes. Those were for future tests, but I don't need to do any more tests. And on the inside, you can see I use the vinyl paint, and it's a good backer. Again, it's super durable and works really well, flexible, and it's a great backing paint for, ColorX stuff. Let's zoom out. We'll take a look at the spray booth. Again, it's a cardboard box. Nothing too exciting here. I've got some old fluorescent tubes here that I've used for a bunch of various products. You can see all the red paint from my actual track car. And then I've got the 4-inch exhaust hose that goes to the exhaust fan, the vents outside. So yeah, that's really it. Let's jump into how I paint these bodies. Let's take a look. So getting ready to go here, I'm adding a little bit more gold, a little bit more orange to make sure I have enough for, the entire project. The mixed bottle is probably, I don't know, 3/4 to 7/8 full. Here's my my lintless towel, and as always, I spray the towel. I don't actually spray the piece that I'm going to be cleaning. So cleaning off the inside of the body before you paint is so important. Getting all those finger oils and other dust and whatever it is that's stuck to the inside of the body is pretty important. I'll throw on my painter glove here because that's the one that's going to be holding the body. I'm using an airbrush, shooting about 35 psi, and that's a 0.5 millimeter tip. I do that so that I could get a very, very fine coat as the initial coat on the Lexan. It really helps to get the paint to stick first. If you lay down a real heavy coat with a spray can or with an airbrush, you inevitably are going to get runs. What I found as I was spraying the hood is that something was up with the airbrush, and it wasn't the usual, adjustment. It turns out part of the airbrush had broke. So I had to go to plan B here, which is my little mini spray gun. This thing is probably from Harbor Freight. It's not very good, but it does lay down enough paint so that I could cover the body. And I had already done the initial real light coat. So even if the paint came out a little bit heavier, it was going to be okay. It should stick okay. I still had to be kind of careful, and I did mess up on the cab. Did put down way too much paint on the cab, so I got some runs, but you don't really see it once the paint is all backed up. So here I'm just making some adjustments to the airbrush to try to get the spray pattern that I want. All right, moving into spraying the rest of the body. This is coats 2 and 3, and what you're seeing here is probably coat 2, so that's why it's still pretty transparent. Again, you try to not lay down real heavy coats, not anything real wet, otherwise it'll run. So I let everything dry for about 10-15 minutes. I walked away, left the fan going, and then I came back and started to do the first of 3 coats of the vinyl paint as the backer paint. So you can see now that it really starts to solidify and make the paint, the orange paint, pop. I had run out of the tan, so I happened to have a can of this blue, which is what I used to shoot the original body for the score, the Yeti score. So here's everybody's favorite part: pulling off that crappy, pulling off that coating, and it wasn't even on there very well. So I had a lot of areas where the paint kind of bled through. So if you haven't done this before, this is a great tip or trick. I use the edge of the X-Acto blade, and I just kind of scrub and scrape all of the edges of the Lexan, the polycarbonate. Not only does it clean it up and make it look better, but it's also easier to handle. You don't have these sharp edges. I'm sort of rounding the corners off here. I also use the blade in this case to scratch off the paint that's the overspray from the paint, since that plastic coating wasn't on there very well. I wasn't too worried about it affecting the glossiness because, as I mentioned before, I'm going to ultimately use a clear matte from Tamiya. So here's the first initial coats of the Tamiya paint. Again, you need to do a light coat to start, but immediately you'll start to see that the glossiness of the Lexan goes away. I really like this stuff. I hope it holds up. I've never used it before. This is the first time, so we'll see what happens. I ultimately did 2 or 3 coats to really knock down the glossiness, and it left it with a really nice sheen. You can still see, the metal flake, or it's not really a metal flake, but the flake in the orange and gold paint. So it still pops in the light, but it doesn't have that same glossiness that we're used to seeing on the Lexan bodies. So if you haven't been doing this on your Lexan bodies, you've been missing out. I've been using Gorilla Tape on a lot of my RC car bodies, or at least some version of Gorilla Tape, for a very long time now. And it really helps prolong the life of your body for a couple reasons. First, the contact points don't get scratched up and you don't see all of the scratches through the paint. And also it sort of helps reinforce the areas that are making contact with the body mounts. You know, I've used Gorilla Tape on the last body, and that thing held up amazing. You know, it's still, there was only one area that really cracked, and that was just because it was a super thin, overly stretched from the formwork part of the body. Yeah, I put this stuff on every little contact point, not just the mounting points, but wherever it might hit the cage, I use it for that as well. It just really helps prolong the life of the body and keep it looking good, at least from the inside, so that it looks good on the outside. One of the other tips that I have is when slicing the tape off, always start from the inside and move upward. That way it sort of forces the tape up against the body as you cut, and it creates a really nice clean cut. And another tip that I found is using one of these little stone Dremels. If you just kind of force it through the tape, that tape will just disappear. I used to try to cut it with an X-Acto, and it was always hit or miss, and it never really was very clean. But if you just kind of burn it through and let it like meet the plastic, it does a great job, nice and clean. I mean, the little stone gets all of the yucky sticky residue all over it, but you can just clean it off. Works really well. Another little tip for those of you who use scissors to cut tape, if you grab a piece of tape from the same tape that you're cutting and just sort of dab it on the sticky parts, the sticky part of the tape will actually remove the sticky stuff, the sticky residue that's left over on your scissors. I try to tear the tape as much as possible, but you know, it leaves sort of a ragged edge, so you know, every once in a while I'll go ahead and cut it. All right, so here is the black vinyl stuck to the outside of the body. So it's actually vinyl, it's not paint, it's stuck to the outside of the body. You see how I have the white vinyl on the inside of the body that was cut in reverse. Now I'm sticking this black logo right on top of the body, and it's just going to remain there. If it gets tore up, it gets tore up. I can replace it. Alright guys, so I think that more or less covers some of the prep and painting tips that I wanted to share with you all in this video. I have a few more minor tasks to tackle before I am completely finished with this truck, but I think I'm finally at the point where I can start to fully rebuild the truck and get it out there and do some bashing. Be sure to post your body and prep painting tips in the comments section below, and as always, if you have any questions, be sure to post them and I will do my best to respond. Until the next video, everyone.